So today we're gonna have a chance to hear from some fairly illustrious women who are in the IT industry, several of whom have been in the industry for quite a long time, and I've had the privilege of interacting with in one context or another. Um, in the United States, as Dennis says, in our departments and in our programs here in Michigan Tech, we're well below the national average in terms of the number of women on campus in education. In the computer science department, we were approaching 20% women a few years ago, but COVID just really did us in. And so we're down in the upper teens in terms of the percentage of women, which is a whole lot better than where we were a while ago. We had an incoming class with 100 students, one of which was female. That's really, really sad. So anyhow, with that a little bit of background, it's obviously very important to us to find ways to encourage women to go into computing. In industry, the tech industry has also been notorious for women in computing, women in technology. The statistics are something like 26% of tech workers being women, which again is sad, but it is increasing, and I get the sense from everyone I've talked to that the environment is getting better most places. Definitely not all places in the tech industry. I've heard of a few places that's not. But anyhow, with that being said, what we're going to hear from today is some ideas on what is going on in the tech industry for women, how we can improve on both our environments and attracting more women into the tech industry and keeping women in the tech industry. So with that, let me introduce our panelists. And I'm going to keep our introductions short so we get to actually hear from them. So first off, we have our moderator, Paula Stolar. Paula is a 92 graduate, is that right? And she's currently the Senior Technology Director at Ally Financial Services and is on the Board of Directors of the Michigan Council of Women in Technology. We have Kathi Bellotti, Cybersecurity Program Manager at U.S. Ventures Incorporated. And she's worked at a number of places, such as Thrive Financial, the Nielsen Company, and others. And she's a founding member of Women in Technology Wisconsin. And we have Marie Buche. She's the Associate Dean and Professor of Management and Management Information Systems in the College of Business here at Tech. We have Cindy Rutyna. Cindy is one of the many Cindys that has worked at Ford or does still work at Ford.
Still work at Ford.
Yeah, you still work at Ford.
Yep.
A lot of the other Cindys have retired. I was out last night and we were talking about the number of Cindys at Ford. And so anyhow, this Cindy has worked in vehicle software and electronic solutions. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yes, right. Okay. And then we have Carrie Schaller from Dow Chemical. And I've had the privilege of interacting with Carrie a number of times. She's always helpful getting me people for my CS1000 class. And we have Elaine Stevens, who's the head of customer engineering at Google and a state board member of the Women in Technology in Wisconsin. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paula.
When I was cyber stalking Elaine and Kathi, I learned they're both on the Women in Technology group in Wisconsin, and they've met through, you guys worked together at one point, right? You have both been in various different industries, which so have I. Tell us what you've learned by going through technology in so many various industries and what's been appealing about that to you in your career.
Yep, so I'm an opportunistic type person from a career perspective. I don't look at something and say I'm going to do this and this is what I'm going to do and it's absolute. I always say that looks really cool, I want to try that. And that's been kind of the way I've approached my whole career going forward. I actually got a degree in business and started out in sales and marketing. I'm good at it, but I was miserable. I had a very progressive VP of sales at the time, and this is where I date myself, right? Where I actually, I took on the role of getting laptops into these sales guys' hands for the first time, getting them off of Goldmine, for all the old timers that might have known about Goldmine, and getting them onto a centralized customer relationship management tool, as well as teaching them SAP. So that was a fun first challenge and my first step into the tech side of the world, and I just fell in love with the tech stuff. Went from there to becoming a Novell engineer and did that for several years. And then from there progressed into managing a data center, taking on a network. And then the big first worm hit, Code Red. You guys remember that? And cybersecurity and information security kind of fell in my lap and totally fell in love. And I've been pursuing that ever since in various markets and careers, including working for Nielsen. So a lot of you may know them from the rating side. There's a large consumer side that's just as big. They merged the two companies back together, worked with them in 100 countries, 660 offices, 135 data centers. So really got to learn a lot about a lot of different techs and technologies, and of course the security side. We had incidents happening daily. And then from there moved into financial for a while, realized that is a very regulated industry. And left there and went over to US Venture, which I've been loving. I had the opportunity to build their cybersecurity program and kind of bring them where they are and continue to mature them there when they're considered critical infrastructure for the US. So it's been a fun journey for me.
And you had a lot of fun at Christmas when we say the word Log4j, right?
Oh, Log4j. And I was ready to report that to the board then, right? So
Yeah.
that's the big thing going, okay, now the board's going to want to know. And it's in the past, it's been kind of like a fire drill of, are you sure you've got it all? Are you sure you've got it all? And I found out, and this is where continuing education really comes in and taking skills of my sales and making it work more for me in other areas. And that was where I took my storytelling from sales time. And I built my story around our Log4j journey for the week, around the fact that when I went to my daughter's hockey game, I was very tired. It was a week of Log4j, 14-hour days, many of us putting it in, trying to figure out what was happening with this vulnerability and what it was all in, because it is pervasive and everywhere. And got to the game, and one of the guys like, you look pretty tired. And he was an IT guy from another company. And I said, yeah. And he says, Log4j. I said, absolutely. He says, we're lucky. We have appliances, and we don't have Apache. And I looked at him, and I said, it's in the appliances, it's in the cloud, it's everywhere. And his face just fell. And while I got to watch my daughter play hockey and enjoy it, he was on the phone talking to his peers, trying to figure out what type of risks he just completely ignored for a week. And that's what I told our board and said, that's why we know our program is working. So never underestimate taking your skills from one area and bringing them into another area.
Excellent. And the storytelling piece is a huge part. You know, those of us that are in technology, you know, coding and programming are a piece of it, but being able to explain the reasons why you're doing what you're doing and understanding the business is equally as critical. So just remember that. And so Elaine, you also have a very diverse industry experience. Are you as opportunistic as Kathi, or what led you through your journey?
Yeah, I'd say I'm very opportunistic like Kathi. I've never one who had a plan. Like people ask you what you want to do when you grow up, and I'm like, first off, I don't want to grow up. Second off, I have no idea, right? So I started my journey. I went to MIT and I got a physics degree, and even that wasn't really planned for. My big brother was a physicist, so I blindly followed in his steps. And then suddenly, towards the end of my college career, realized that this was leading me towards more years of studying, and I was really done with studying. And I needed to pivot. I needed to do something different than to stay in academia. And so I thought about, what are the skills I have that I've learned that are transferable? What can I take this degree and do? And if you think about, you take particles in a particle collider and you slam them together, you don't see anything. What you get is a lot of data. And so what I'd built up over my 4 years of schooling was a huge ability to do data analysis. I always say, I was the original data scientist. I was a data scientist before data scientists were cool. And so kind of took that and then pivoted into a consulting firm that did data analytics consulting. And I was kind of very well suited to that. Did 10 years of that on the road. And I always say, part of what you learn through this career is what you don't want to do. And at some point I'm like, normal people don't get on a plane Monday morning and return Thursday night. What would happen if I was home 7 days a week and not just 3 days a week? And so switched to get off the road, transferred those skills that I'd learned from that job and learned how to be a project manager into another role that was a project manager. And it happened to be in the early days of, I was working for a company that was managing fleets of cars and trucks for other companies in the late 90s. And it was the early IoT days. And so we had put telematics in the cars and built up the first systems that could track and detect and figure out about how you reduce idle time to save energy, how you can do safety off of all of these things. And so, I look at this, and throughout my journey, I've pivoted to various different jobs, but each one I've taken a skill that I learned in a previous job, and it's been relevant to a later job. So 3 jobs later, I joined the company that ultimately got acquired by Kathy's company. And part of what we were doing was, calculating cost of fuel for full truckload movements of goods. And suddenly all of my experience in the transportation industry was highly relevant. Never planned, but just kind of one jump to the next. And from there, I built up while I was there all of this cloud experience. So we had these systems that were 15 years old that had started when the company was an idea in the founder's mind. And as with any company, it morphed what it was going to do, and people kept adding on new modules of code until we had a system that worked, but it couldn't scale. It couldn't modernize, and it was actually hindering us from getting to do the great things we wanted to do. And we said, all right, we need to rebuild this. And are we going to rebuild this on-prem one more time, or are we going to go to the cloud? And really looked at the benefits of the cloud and said, let's move this thing. And so really got to lead a team that was transferring and rebuilding these systems from on-prem into this cutting-edge cloud piece. And then when I wanted to kind of move on from that role, what I found was this really suited me very well, because what I'd learned was Google's entire stack, and I'd learned it from the perspective of the customer. I'd walked a mile in our customers' shoes, which really suited me well to kind of now step onto the other side and go, my job every day is to help the people that were in my role be successful when they want to migrate their systems to Google.
That's a great story. And, being in technology, you see a lot of stickers on people's laptops, and I saw one recently that said, data is the new bacon. So I thought that was really cool. And so, Carrie, 34 years at Dow. That's quite a career. You're going to use this. Yeah.
I started in kindergarten.
So that is, similar to Cindy. You've been at Dow basically your whole career, right? Unlike Kathi and Elaine. So tell us about why you stayed with Dow.
That is a great question. So 34 years, coming up on 35. I'm a College of Business graduate here and was in the MIS program. And the simple answer to that, but there's so much more to it, is being in a very large global company, I have changed jobs so many times and been able to stay with that same company. I've had so many opportunities to build on from one to another. But I couldn't have predicted where it would land, and I mentor and coach a lot of younger employees now and encourage them very much to think not so much, oh, what is that next exact job that I want? I always say, I've done that a couple times, and it's worked a couple of times, but most of the times it's pretty unsuccessful. If you're like, I desperately want the job that Elaine has, and that's what I'm going for, by the time I'm skilled for it, we'll have reorganized. It won't exist anymore. So
Well, hate me for not moving out of it.
dang it, would she please quit? And so as I've worked across my career, I began in fairly core IT business application background and migrated to manufacturing, which is a whole different language and a whole different world and a different set of leadership skills. But as I look back on that and I talk to other employees, I usually say, hey, take those skills, take those things that you've had, and start with, I've had these jobs, but don't just call it the job title. I was a program manager and I was a cybersecurity specialist. That's good. Think about from there, what do you like about that? What do you want to grow? And what do you never want to do again? And as you build those things that you want to do, I really want to manage large budgets. Well, good for you. Do that, or I really want to manage people, or I never want to do those things. And I find that's a lot more successful way to look ahead, find things that you can grow and learn in as you look at those future jobs than just trying to hang your hanger on that next job, next job, next job.
And that's a great point, because early on in my career, I had a great mentor who taught me the value of, I had every quarter to sit back and look at the things you've done that quarter and then write down the new skills or the new things you learned and what you liked and what you didn't like. And he helped me build out what was really called my professional portfolio, right? And you just keep adding to that and year over year. And then as you look for your next opportunity, you can look back on there and go, okay, I'm picking this example and this skill and this skill, and I'm applying it to this job that I'm going for. And then you're basically customizing the resume from your portfolio specifically to that. So it was a discipline that I was very fortunate to be taught at a young age. I was 24 at the time, and it's been something I still do. And it's really a great way to help understand where you've been and where you may be able to go that you didn't think you could because you forgot some of those skills you have.
Yeah, for me, that's the not only do I do that, but when I realize 1 quarter or 6 months or whatever increment that I have no new skills to put on, that's when I change roles.
Mm-hmm.
That's the indication that I've stopped growing in the role I'm in and I need to find a new one. And as long as I look at it and go, I'm still picking up new skills, I'm still enjoying this job, I stay.
I love what you were saying, and I just got to share this for the students, for workers, for anybody in the industry. We get a lot of advice to network and to go, and that's very important, to build your network of peers, leaders, outside, whatever that might be. But I'm amazed at how many people track me down, get on my calendar, and whether we're in person or video, hi, I'm Carrie, hi, I'm so-and-so, and they look at me like this. And I go, oh, what brought you here today? Oh, I heard you could really help me with my career planning. I'm thinking, what did you bring to the table? Like, I'm pretty good, but I'm not that good. I cannot divine from your facial expressions what we might want to do next. So the ideal scenario, if you are going to network or meet with someone, is bring that plan. It doesn't have, it can be fancy, it can be little. Bring some thoughts of what you've done, what you like, and that we can have a conversation from, but I am unlikely to read your mind and predict your future.
100%. That's a great tip. And, when you have a mentor-mentee relationship, it's on the mentee to drive and build that relationship. You're getting a favor from the mentor, so just keep that in mind. And so, Marie, educator. And I've learned, Jim and Dennis have been great at explaining to me, the structure of, academia and the roles in, education, very different from industry. And Diane and I are on the CC EAB, and we were talking this week about how we think in industry versus how it's run in academia. So you stayed 18 years, right? So tell us a little bit about why you chose this route versus going into industry.
Process of elimination. I started out believing fervently that I was going to be a psychologist, and loved psychology, loved helping people, loved teaching, loved education. Went into the Air Force 4 years as a missile launch officer in charge of nuclear weapons, which is a little different path than most of my peers. And then after, it was now what? So I tried stay-at-home mom, and I failed. I know some of you fail at retirement. I failed at stay-at-home mom. Started a preschool because I like little kids, and realized I love running a business. So that's how I got into business, per se. I was always in the 10% minority females in almost every field I've gone into. So when you look around the room and you're the only female, I don't even do that because why? Because I'm always a minority in the room. I've never let that hold me back. I might temper some of the things I say occasionally, but you can't let it hold you back. If that's fearful for you, put yourself in situations that make you reach out of your comfort zone. For me, public speaking I was in that category of just kill me, because I hated it. And I would do presentations in college, and people that were your antagonists would cringe when you got up to speak. It's like, put yourself in those situations that make you afraid. Partially, it was technology. There was, in a couple of instances, there was a PC in the office that no one was using. I thought, well, it's gathering dust, so if I'm going to at least knock the dust off of it, I'm going to learn how to use it. I became the IT guy, and that's often how we end up in career fields is opportunity, which you've heard several times today, passion. I didn't know I had a passion for IT until I started doing it, meeting great people, mentors. You look across the aisle and you think, well, I could do that better than that person, and I'm going to give it a try. So, and you've also heard always, always, always keep learning. And I have friends that are like, don't you get tired of that? It's like, don't you not? Because there's always more to learn and meet great people. I like to travel, but I like being at home. So that was, one of my friends often said, you find your non-negotiables, and that's your starting point. So for students, if you have no idea where to begin, start talking to someone. You don't have to call it a mentor, just start talking to someone. Sometimes you don't know what your passion is until you hear yourself say it. So begin with your non-negotiables and go from there. And it's probably going to land you in IT.
Yeah, that's right. And that's great. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's a difficult place to get to, but like Elaine said, know what you've been doing, and when you see that you're not gaining any new skills, that's when you take the moment and you're like, okay, I got to make a change. Before we go on, if there's any questions in the audience, there's a mic in the back. Feel free, or just raise your hand and I can repeat the question for those that are on the Zoom call. And I think the chat is open too. So I don't know, we'll take questions during the whole session, so don't wait until the end. The question is, why do you think there are a minority of females in technology? Why is that? So who wants to take that one on?
I'll start. So some of the research we've done with Women in Technology Wisconsin is trying to answer that question and figure it out. And actually in the 80s, it was almost 35% women in technology. So we've actually gone backwards quite a bit, which has been one of the phenomenons we're trying to figure out. And what we're seeing is that we're losing them in two places. The first place is middle school, and then the second place is like the first or second year of college. And so we're trying to figure out what we can do to bolster those areas and keep those girls in it. What's happening in middle school, we're finding out, is other girls are off in, their friends go do these other fun classes, and so they kind of follow them because they want to stay with girls and friends. And so we're creating WIT for Girls as one of our pillars we use in Wisconsin to create clubs so girls can see that there are other girls also interested, and they build these new bonds and friendships as well, which helps support them through middle school and into high school. Then we've taken it on with WIT on campus then, where we're also trying to get the campuses to have these clubs and relationships, because we find the guys kind of naturally do it and the girls are kind of left out. And it's just nice for them to know that there's others in that field. And then we're bringing in the Women in Technology career side, the WIT at Work, to help become mentors and build relationships with those girls on campus so they have that additional advice of people who've been there and have gone through things. So that's our way of kind of helping and trying to address it. But we really think it starts at that middle school level. And if we can capture more and keep them going in that field, we've got a much greater chance of having a larger group coming in at college now, and then keep that support going for them. And so really this multi-generational network we're trying to build is kind of how we're trying to help that along, because guys aren't intentionally leaving you out. Guys are just being guys. And that's something you have to just realize. They're not even thinking about it. They're just like, oh, dude, let's go do this, and we'll do our coding stuff together, and we'll practice it together. And they fail and laugh about it. Girls, when we fail at doing the code the first time, we think we're failing the class. And that's a mindset we have to change, and the resilience we have to teach them when they're younger, and the perseverance. Because you're really excelling every time you learn. Every time you fail, you're learning and you're growing and developing. And that's a hard thing in technology to take on and remember, because you are going to fail more than you will succeed. But that's what makes you good at what you do.
So the follow-on question was, in middle school, we're losing girls because they're following their friends to non-tech type of courses to stay with their friend group. So the question was, how do we get those girls who are the leaders to go into tech and bring others with them?
So here's a challenge I actually gave to our local community a couple of years, it was before the pandemic. I was through it doing an event, and these girls were super excited. They were talking to me at the end of the event. They're early middle school probably age, and they wanted to show me their Lego robotics that they're working on. And they were so excited to see a woman that was super interested in what they were doing. And here are these girls. So I went up, I spent an extra hour with these girls to give them the time to like show me and really throw enthusiasm to what they were doing. And they were going to a national competition. And the challenge I asked the leaders around there, I said, part of the challenge is people go to do what they think is celebrated and revered, right? And you think about a high school football team, right? When they get to states, what do? We hold a pep rally. We have a parade. We make every student on that football team feel really special, like they're doing something great. A robotics team goes to nationals, and what do? Do we celebrate it at all? Do we make it seem cool? Do we make it seem like it's something really special? We don't, right? When I was at MIT, and part of the reason I think about this is MIT plays lots of sports, and they play all of them horribly. And so a football game might have 6 people show up for it. But most of these robotics competitions actually came from MIT in my days of being there. And when we had our robotics competition, you sat in the hall for 24 hours to get a seat at the game, right? It was the thing. The thing that revered status was that you did well in this, that you got into the competition. And suddenly, if you put status, if you put excitement around these things, girls, they want to fit in, they want to be cool. And is the cheerleading more cool than the math and science? And that's coming from a lot of times what us as adults are helping them think about and what we're celebrating. And what would the world look like if we celebrated the technology stuff as much as the sports?
Yeah, and another thing we would like to do to really help those girls and influence in there is put women and college girls in front of them on a regular basis. We try to get into the schools, right, and show them the examples and the models, and then talk about what we do and the fun we're having, and showing them that there is this world of possibility out there. We're also working with the school systems themselves, because there are schools out there in Wisconsin especially that aren't well developed, or they have a lot of tech classes but they don't have like a tech path. And so we're helping them build that out too, which makes it easier to follow trails and paths versus just kind of bits and pieces. My daughter's a great example. She's now at UW Stout. She's going into animation. And when she was in high school, she was taking, animation classes. And they go, oh, that's not a tech class. I'm like, yeah, it is. So that was in the arts program, which, so it's interesting to see how that works and plays out too. So we're trying to help the schools become more cohesive in what they're showing and the paths that can be taken of all these great classes they have, and also bringing additional classes in. We've got the Microsoft Teals program going on in the Fox cities, which is great, which actually takes women who are application developers and bring them into a classroom with a teacher over 2 years, and they start teaching coding, and they're teaching the teacher while they're teaching the class, and then within the 2 years, the teacher becomes the teacher of the coding class now and can take it over from there. So we're also trying to do that, and the more women we can get doing this and putting them in front of these young girls, the more excitement we're seeing that, oh, this is possible, there's people out there, this is something I can do, great, let's keep going forward. So that's helped quite a bit in that area as well. Girls approach things differently than guys do, and we see this at career fairs. We'll have a computer open sitting on the table, and I'll have my cybersecurity warfare stuff set up and some other things. These boys will just push through and come in, and the girls will all stand back, right, and observe. And it's just the nature of the way they approach and learn things. And so what we have to make sure we're doing is be very conscious of that at career fairs and other things, that we make the right space for the way people want to approach things and learn things. Girls are natural observers first. They're critical thinkers, and they kind of look back and figure things out and then decide, okay, I'm going to go forward. And they're much more, I don't want to say tentative, but they tend to approach it in a much more deliberate way. I think that's a good word to use for it. So I think what we also have to realize is boys are like bulls in a china shop. They just go for this or that or the other thing, right? My daughter got frustrated in her tech ed class because the teacher spent 3 days talking about safety. She goes, I got it on the first day. I said, look around the people with you. Did they get it? And she's like, oh God, yeah, he's talking to all the boys. I said, yeah, exactly. So so you just have to figure that out. And she was ready to quit because she thought the teacher didn't like her, and she was frustrated. And I said, go back and observe the whole room, and don't think about it just as you and how it's affecting you and that teacher. Look at what he's doing in that whole room. And she came back and she said, Mom, those boys are dangerous. They don't think before they touch a tool. And also she's going, it's not about me. Okay, I'm staying with this class, right? So that's part of it too, is helping them discern those things.
I think it's also, I mean, some of it's a stigma, right? Like, if I think back to my days in like middle school and high school, you never wanted to, as a girl, you didn't want to be the geek. Like, there was nothing good about your social status as soon as you were labeled intellectual and a geek, right? And technology gave you that label really quickly. And that's where I really fundamentally believe that us as leaders in the space can change that stigma. We can celebrate it so that it's not the thing that says, hey, you're a social outcast if you want to choose this path. Because there's this pressure. You have seen so many girls that start down this path and they love it, but they can't handle the pressure, the outcast that comes with, hey, why aren't you doing the cheerleading? Why aren't you doing the things that carry social status? Instead, you're choosing to do this, and they eventually just kind of fold into it. Because we still kind of put that stigma that it's better for guys to be intellectual than it is for girls at places. And I think in middle school they're very sensitive. They're still figuring out who they are, and they cave much easier.
Also, though, girls and boys do think differently. When you watch children play, you will see the young girls, they will role play and they will play house. The boys will play with the dump truck and they're moving the dirt and, they're not role playing. They're just doing stuff and they do think differently. But just because you think differently doesn't mean that you can't be in technology. It's just the way that it's approached. So I think that connection and then the coolness of it, they want to follow their friends. And what do the boys do? The boys play football. Is football technical? No, but it's a technical game. Right. What the cheerleading is very technical. I did not think cheerleading was a sport. You watch those girls do competitive cheer, and I'm like, that's synchronized gymnastics. Oh my gosh, that's technical. So you have to get them to start thinking, like, even though it's not technical, it can be. And I think the transition of the coolness, right? So if we can transition the girls to think that it's okay to take that skill set and apply it technically, you're going to grab them.
And I think having role models is super important. Maybe more so for the girls than for the guys, but it's really, even though I've always been in that minority set, I can see where we attract women to IT because we show our passion, we don't hide it, we show different paths to create careers that are very fulfilling. And I asked my daughter when she was in middle school, high school, are you going to go in IT? Thinking, this is my opportunity to convince my daughter. I mean, if I can't convince her, what good am I, right? But she said, no, I want to work with people. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. What does she think I do all day? So I was very deliberate after that in showing that these are career fields where we work closely with people, finding solutions, training, fixing problems, being role models, and helping others find their passion.
Yeah, and that's really cool because some of the opportunities that are out there for the girls and the women are really huge. In the hacking community, ethical hackers, the hacking teams are looking for women because we think differently, because it makes the team stronger. They want to have the diversity there because they're better at the job of hacking and thinking about different ways to do things, having differentiating approaches and views on those teams. So I went from tech IT into cybersecurity. So I went from a small group to a smaller group, right? And they are always wanting more because they actually value that diverse thought and thinking it's something we can bring. Elaine, do you remember the one programming thing they talked about with the cars, and wasn't it the airbags or the seats in the cars that they had the men designing and programming, and they had no women on the team. And suddenly when they put the models in, the women and the children in those seats the dummies were getting killed, right, in the test. I'm like, well, what's going on? Well, it's because they hadn't thought about the size of a person not being a man size. Yeah. And so they had to go back and do a lot of redesigning because of that. So there's a lot of value, and those are the things we need to teach and the examples we need to bring to help all these young ladies know that it's okay to be different. It's okay to have your thoughts and your viewpoints different, because that's what brings the value of you into that environment. And that's good, and that you should be comfortable with that.
Yeah, it's one of the things that Google we talk about all the time. If you think about Google, we have 10 or more now products that are used by 1 billion people every day, 1 billion users every day that use it. And the statement they make and drill into our head all the time is, if you're gonna make a product that's made for everyone, it has to be made by everyone. You need representation of all of the different kinds of users, the girls, the guys, the people from different countries, the people with disabilities. As soon as you miss any of them, you have no chance of making a product that will be good for everyone. And that's where diversity, equity, and inclusion really makes a difference in the business world, because the world is so intermingled. Find me somebody who's making a product that, and they go, my goal is to sell only 10 of these. Everyone wants to sell to everyone, which means you need to have these viewpoints. You need to have the women represented, because, and sometimes it's just the fact that our stature is different. Sometimes it's we think differently. But the value in all these different things, there's a great ad that Google has that talks about, their cameras and the work they've done to try and make sure that people with dark skin tones look well in the camera, because historically there was never people with dark skin tones building the product. And so when they were taking pictures to do the tests, they took pictures of the people in the room, all people with light skin tones, and these cameras did terribly at it. And it's a real big statement about the progress we're making, that people are thinking about these things now.
Yeah, and Elaine, that's a great point that Google's making, especially when it comes to accessibility as well.
Yes.
That's part of DE&I, is making sure your products and what you're selling and what you're using are available to everybody. And you have to think about those who have some accessibility challenges. I want to kind of change kind of the pace a little bit, switch directions here. I found in my career that I'm often the only female on the team or in a meeting. There are times, when I've taken a Zoom screen, there's 24 people and me, and they're all men, and it's me. So, it is a little bit of intimidating. And, women, especially younger in their careers, we often think we have to meet every single job qualification and experience, check, 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 before we apply. Men are like, oh, I heard of that. That's cool. I think my brother does it, or a good friend. I'm going to go for it. And that's kind of the riskiness and the risk-taking difference between men and women. And it goes back to what Kathi said earlier, how they're taught at a younger age to take a little bit more risk. So oftentimes, being the only woman at the table, or, a few women amongst a sea of guys, how are you heard in your organization? What do you have to do that you feel is a little bit differently in the tech space than maybe in a traditional role or different career that has helped you get to where you're at?
Can I describe to you an industry conference that I normally attend every year? And it's a fabulous conference, but it is a combination of manufacturing and IT. So it's operations IT. So let's take a field that has very few women, and then let's combine that with another field that has very few women. And then when we go to the conference and a vendor or someone says, Carrie, I hope I can find you. And I'll be like, I know there's going to be 700 people there, but I'll be the woman. So you will not really have a very difficult time.
But isn't it great with the bathrooms?
Oh, that's exactly what I say.
For the bathrooms.
You get to a break and they say, and I'm like, woohoo, I'm all alone in here. It's fantastic. Sometimes I use that to my advantage. Yeah. You'll find me. I'll be the woman. It doesn't. Now after that, I've got to, make my statement, be of value, show what I have to bring to the table. But I'm going to tell you students that are here, you're already getting a little used to it because we've talked about the ratio that's here. So this is not a bad foundation to, as a female. Or I'm glad that we've got male counterparts here because we all need to be working together. We all need to be reaching out to each other, whether we're in the minority or the majority. If we're the majority, we can be allies. But my message out of that is I don't feel that I've suffered from that. But at the same time, I'll hear some women say, I've got to be, 10 times more prepared. I've got to be 10 times better. I don't worry about that. I bring myself, bring my knowledge, stand at the table. You can easily find me, and I don't let that get in my way.
I actually thought about this deeply when I was in grad school because I felt like I wasn't being heard. I would, it was the classic where I would say something, get no response from a team. Another person on the team, usually a male, would say the same thing and, oh, good answer, that's great, let's run with it. And I thought, well, what am I doing differently that's causing or contributing to that situation? So I owned it and I started watching and listening carefully. And I found out that I was a person of very few words. So when I said something, it was a 4-word sentence, maybe. I didn't elaborate, I didn't pitch it. And I saw that the gentlemen were bogarting the mic. They would, even to the point where you'd say, is there a question? Would you please get to it? So I started holding on to the mic a little longer. Make sure that your voice is connected with the idea, make eye contact, pitch the idea, and if it still gets stolen by someone else, go back to it and say, I'm glad you're building on my idea. Just be a little more assertive in those situations. Is it easy? No, it's not sometimes. Sometimes it's just easier to be, walk out in a huff. But
well, and there's a
hold
fine,
on to it.
Yeah, there's a fine line of assertive and like aggressive or reactive, and that skill and the way you hone in on it is a lifelong skill. Whether it's on the job, in the home, driving a car, in the grocery store line, so it's just something that I think everybody has to work at their entire life. To make sure that they are heard and they're heard in an assertive manner. So it's
Right.
Yeah, and a couple of the tricks that we've talked about and learned over the years too is a lot of women tend to upspeak, which makes your statement sound like a question and you're not quite sure what you're saying. And so then it leaves a different impression. It shows uncertainty, even though you can be very sure of what you're stating and bringing to the table. You need to ensure that your voice has that even modulated tone so that it sounds like more of a statement and that you're confident of what you're saying, even though you are when we upspeak, because that's just something that women naturally do as well. Another trick we've learned, first off, is the stealing your idea back. It's great if a guy in the room takes the idea from you because you go, thanks for building on my idea. It's the best statement to use to kind of bring it back and make sure you're still engaged in part of that conversation. A trick you can use if there's 2 women in the room is echoing. So if one woman makes a recommendation, the other one picks up and says, hey, Kathi had that great idea. I think we should take a deeper look at it. And then, or restating it. And that seems to help as well. So there's just a couple things to do a little bit differently, but assertive versus aggressive is very, very important. There's a skill of being soft but strong. And it's what you really need to focus in on. And I've actually questioned some of the men sometimes because they're like, well, Elise was kind of a bitch in that session, right? And I look at it and go, would you have said that if Pat had said that instead? And all of a sudden he's like, well, because I heard Pat 2 meetings ago say the same thing. And so I can also catch the guys on the flip side going, are you applying the same view when it's a woman stating it versus when a man would state that? So it's a bit of educating when you can in a good way, and also just ensuring that you're presenting yourself in the best way you can to be at that table.
Yeah, just kind of building a little bit on what Kathi said, when you have the luxury of not being the only woman at a 700-person conference, but you have somebody else, another woman that's going to a meeting with you, one of the things is make a bond, make a pact with the other women. Oftentimes women compete. We succeed better when we, go in together and go, hey, look, make space for me. I have an idea, right? Because it's often easier to make space for somebody else and go, I know Kathi has a really great idea. She was telling me about it earlier. Kathi, could you elaborate on your idea, right? And so if you go in with other women and kind of have that pact ahead of time, you can amplify your voices and it's less scary. You've got somebody else there to help you along.
Yep, and one more trick, and it's honest to God, it actually works, is you go into the bathroom stall before the big meeting, when you got to go in front of the board or whatever else, it's a big one. Superman pose. You guys know the Superman pose? Honest to God, it actually works, and it builds your confidence a level up. Your tone changes. The way you walk into the room changes. Oh, and by the way, have you ever noticed when guys sit at the table, they take up space? We all go with women and go, oh, we'll just be really organized and stuff. Spread out, take your space, right? And the Superman pose really does make it sounds funny. I even have different songs I'll sing in my head beforehand. It really works, and it can make a big difference in how you're perceived in that meeting then. So take advantage of it.
Yeah, so Dennis's statement, for those who didn't hear it, is, he considers himself an ally, and so when even himself, he, trips up and uses guys as a general term, for example, which is, a male word, or refer to men in technology when there's women, or microaggressions, what can we do to help? And you know what, I'm going to take this one because this just happened to me last week. I was in a senior leadership meeting with about 58 people, and the top leader at the very end of the call said, any questions, guys and girls? And so one of my coworkers immediately put in the chat, and there's only 8 of us on the call, and she said, please use gals or women. And he saw it in the chat and said, oh, that's just me, that's who I am, you're never gonna break me, of kind of saying guys and girls. So it was at the very end of the meeting, and I had to get to another meeting, but I did have a minute between meetings to find a great Forbes article about why it is more frustrating to women to call us girls than men really perceive. And if you think about it, these words travel together. Guys and gals, girls and boys, men and women. So when you say guys and girls, you are putting women behind the men in kind of the classification. It's small things like that as a woman, you just need to kind of remind folks, and trust me, there's a lot of great websites and articles out there that you can just say, hey, here's a gentle reminder. And hopefully they'll do better next time, and you just kind of bring it to the presence. I don't know, have you guys done anything similar?
Similar, and as well, never embarrass.
Right.
Because there's no way to make anyone less of an ally, more conscious in an uncomfortable way than when you find that article or you have those right words to say. Years ago, I was on the phone with a group of people, and it was before we were doing video, and it was a colleague of mine from Germany, and he was saying 2 things all the time. He kept talking about a new team member that was coming, and he kept talking about, the Chinese girl. And again, we weren't on video, so he couldn't read our expressions, but I know what my face was doing in my quiet office. And every time he said something, you could just hear the pause. I would have talked to him later in a gentle way, but he was perceptive enough that he called me afterward, and he said, and we had a good enough relationship, and I think he knew that Carrie, I just think I did something wrong, and I have no idea what it is. And you know what? Thank you. And he's not a native English speaker, so I explained that there were 2 issues there. We talked about the girl issue, and I said, we didn't need to mention the person's nationality every single time. When you're saying that, it's as if you're calling that out among anything else about her. But that was beautiful that he chose to contact me afterward. But otherwise, I usually try to do it behind the scenes.
Never embarrass. And so in that meeting, I will say, the individual who put woman in the chat really, the individual, the gentleman, he took offense. Like, he was embarrassed that someone called him out it was in chat. And so that's why I chose afterward to send the email one off.
Yeah, so I mean, I think your question's really great, and I think one of the things we do at Google, because I think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and you think about kind of being an ally to women. I look at my journey and go, there's a lot I need to learn about, the transgender community or ethnicities, and just trying some days to keep up with what are the politically acceptable terms. What am I saying that's a faux pas? I do want to be an ally to people, but I often feel like I'm not educated enough, or the world's changing fast enough and afraid, and you're right about not embarrassing people. And what we'll pull together is ally groups where you can have that conversation in isolation that talks about, is this term acceptable? Where I can ask a naive question, and the statement going in is always, it's a learning space. We're going to make mistakes. You can ask a question. No one's going to judge you on the fact that you're not educated, that goes, I don't understand. I made this phrase. Why did that not come off the way I thought? This was my intent. Like, why are people reacting differently than I intended? Because there's a lot of growth, right? And it's a tricky spot because people don't want to be embarrassed. You're used to doing what you've done, but the world's moved on.
But you can see your question provoked a lot of emotion. But the theme, because it does hit home, whether we're female or a different gender, but the way that we fix that as a society, all three examples, education. So we have to keep evolving, and we have to understand some things may offend other people, but we don't know. But we have to be willing to learn, well, what is not offensive. And sometimes we can get operation overload. Like, I don't want to say anything because I don't know who I'm going to offend, but it is education, and then it's respect, right? And the reason you're willing to learn is because you want to, respect. So
we have a question in the very back. So the question is, how do you productively approach a group of men who persistently make you feel belittled or laughed at?
Okay. Let me give
break this
you
down.
one man, and it could extend to a group. Several years ago, I got a fine promotion. Great recognition of work I was doing, moved into another area. Hooray for Carrie. I had a colleague, a man, who prior to that treated me like I knew nothing. If I was in a meeting with him, he would turn his head because he was superior and he was a blah blah architect, and surely his title endowed in him more knowledge than me. I got this promotion, and who wants to get on my calendar right away and come and get my opinions and what's my direction? And I was stunned because I am no smarter than I was last week. If you thought I was a dummy last week, I'm still the same dummy. And that took a lot of self-control, because that's exactly what was going through my mind. I'm still the same dum-dum, and now you think because I have a new title, I know something a lot more than you. So I've really had to work my way to smooth through those situations. And again, treated him professionally, but that was like a trust and verify thing, because I then didn't really trust a lot of that relationship. I was making the same points that I had earlier, but really had to work at it with him.
And one of the things you can do is you can go at it and address it head on. I feel, if you start with yourself, hey, I feel like when we have a presentation or we're doing a group project, that you're not necessarily on my side or giving me support I need. Why is that? Help me understand. The other thing you can do is I often, before I approach anyone, I do self-reflect. And it's hard to do because you're like, this is the treatment I'm receiving. I have to raise my conscious to what am I doing to receive that treatment? And really take a minute to self-reflect. And then if I can't come up with anything, I may go directly to the individual or ask somebody who knows us both and see if they can shed some light on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, as I think about it, I've had a number of times in my career where, there's early in my career, I was in consulting, I worked with these 3 gentlemen, and one of them would actually never talk to me. He would talk to another gentleman in the room and say, "Can you tell Elaine this?" And I was literally in the room, right?
Oh my gosh.
And
That's ridiculous.
yeah, exactly. So clearly my ears didn't work very well. And I thought about it, and for me, a lot of times it's picking and choosing the battles that go, how hard is this going to be, and what's the benefit? And one of the things I encourage all of you guys to do is, when people do that to you, don't let it eat at your self-esteem. My thing always is, I look at those moments and go, I feel so sorry for that guy, because my interpretation was he didn't know how to deal with a woman in technology. He was awkward, and for whatever reason, in his awkwardness, chose to avoid talking to me. I never took it as a reflection of me. And I think that really helps me a lot of times, that when I can look at it and go, I feel sorry for them. They're still in a different spot in their journey. And am I going to choose right now to invest into that journey? Or am I going to take the easy way out and walk out of the room? And sometimes I take the easy way. It's probably not the right choice, but at the end of the day, you only have so much energy.
Yeah, and it's a great example, and it's happened to me with women and men. And so that's something important to understand too, and that's one of the reasons we love Women in Technology Wisconsin. We say we rise by lifting each other up, because women are so good at being competitive with each other, and we end up shooting each other in the foot, and the guys just walk right past us, right? So a lot of times, self-reflection first. I use divide and conquer, because whenever you have pack mentality, it's hard to break into the pack. So take an opportunity separate and pick out 1 or 2 and just kind of try to ferret out what's going on and understand better, and then help them understand your perspective of what you heard versus what they said. Another big thing that I've learned, being a mom of a autistic son, and we used to be called Asperger's, right, is there are a lot of neurodiverse guys in technology. They just don't know it. And their skill set with behavioral and communication is horrendous. And that they don't even recognize or realize the social norms that they need in order to be successful themselves beyond what they can do in that tech area. And a lot of it, like the guy you mentioned, I'm going, oh my God, that's my son. I could see my son sitting in a room as an adult doing that exact thing, because he's just like, oh my gosh, I can't face her. I can't look at her because it's a girl, right? And so those are the things you have to think about, as well as what's going on with them too. Because too often with women, we always take it in as, it must be me, right? It must be me. I'm broken. I'm not right. I'm not remarkable. And you need to understand that you are awesome, you are remarkable, and you have a lot to provide and give. And understand that it may be because they have lower confidence in themselves, and they're a little bit scared of what you're bringing into the room or to the table, and they don't know how to deal with it. And they don't know that you can be an ally for them as well. So I try to build the bridges that way. And then a fun thing I do at trade shows and conferences that I use to my advantage, being a woman, is I'll have my male peers with me, and we'll be talking to different vendors, and the sales guys focus on the men. So I get tchotchkes and I get the information, and I never get sales calls because they disregard me.
That is so awesome.
I wanted to add one more thing. It often is the case that you can identify who the ringleader is in that group. And if you can do what all of these wonderful people have said, use some of those techniques one-on-one, embarrassing them publicly is not a good idea. But to talk to them individually and become human, and more of someone that, oh, you have an interesting idea that I can, that you can share and build rapport. And that happened to me in the classroom, where a group of young men who had been together through high school and then college, and I was hearing bird chirping sounds while I'm trying to lecture. And it's, it's funny for a while, but it eats at your self-esteem. It's like, what am I doing or not doing? And I read something once somewhere that if you condone it, if you ignore it, you condone it. So if you don't address it, you have just given permission for people to treat you that way.
That's right.
But you don't have to do it in the room with all those people and make it an issue. It's better, I would say, to do it personally outside of the venue, as they were saying earlier.
We have another question in the room. Yeah, so the question is, we have a senior in the room who's often through her experience here at Tech has taken on group projects and in times has been the leader. And so as a female leader, in a group setting where there's mostly men, how do you take that on?
This is the best practice you're going to get for your career. I would start by saying that having recruited, interviewed, talked to students for many years, I want to hear about your technical skills. I want to hear all kinds of things. What you've done in those group projects and how you've behaved is critical. I want to tell you a really quick interview thought for you and anyone else in the room, and I've heard this so many times that I want to share it. We'll talk about those group projects because there's so much to learn, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard, I was in this class and I was really the only one that was getting stuff done, and I talked to them and I talked to the professor, and eventually I just threw the whole thing on my back and I got it done myself. Spoken that is a fabulous accomplishment. You got it done, okay, you crossed the finish line, but that is not great practice for the rest of the world or the rest of your future career. That is not as impressive as you might think it is, because we want to know you can get things done, but the fact that you're going to come to work at any of our companies or you're going to go on in an academic world, and those kind of people are going to be around you forever. And until you build up those skills of understanding who is good at what, I mean, an example, we were talking neurodivergent students. We had a gentleman on the spectrum working in my team for years. Once we recognized that, and then these are the roles that he plays, oh my gosh, he brought way more to the table than anyone could have. Is he the one to give the final presentation? No, he wasn't. But it's you're gonna learn more and have more to share if you can figure out the right skills of people and properly assign that. Then throw it on your back and do it yourself.
Play into the team's strengths.
I echo that too,
Yeah.
because every team player has a position, and that's how you get across the finish line. Is everybody picks up their part of it that they're good at, and that's how you make it through. There's a saying like you're only as good as your weakest link, and so but you have to recognize as a team leader, maybe you don't know what their strengths are, but have a meeting and ask, how can you help with this project? Just right out ask them.
Yeah, and so often in school, kids think it has to be an equal distribution of the work. And that's not really the best value of the team. The best value is using the strengths of the team and leveraging it, which may mean someone does 35% of the work and someone does 10%, but that critical 10% was the polishing you needed or something else, right? So it's really understanding what the value of that person brings to the team and leveraging those values and not sitting there going, well, I did 45%. Because that's what we tend to do a lot, is chop it that way, and that's not the way the real world works either. It's what are you bringing to the table for your values for this situation, and there are times when you'll be the one that's got the mother load, and other times you'll be the one that's barely doing anything but editing the tiny little things at the end. So it's okay.
And people want to help. I think they don't want to be the bump, that's I don't want to do anything. No, people like to be known. Yeah, accomplish that. That's great. It's a great feeling to finish something and do it well. So,
yeah, one of the most powerful things a leader said to me years ago was, he said, just taken over a team, he brought us together. It was his first team meeting. He said, I'll ask of you guys exactly one thing. And he said, I need you to approach every situation with the starting assumption that everyone else on the team has good intentions. Now figure out what story you have to tell yourself in your head to make the situation make sense. And so that comes across as, when you find somebody that's not engaging, sometimes it's something behind the scenes with their family, with their life. And if you start with, okay, what might make this happen? It's often easier to figure out how to make it better than if you start with, a frustration of, hey, I can't get this person to engage. And so I always encourage people to, start with what might make this happen that would make it make sense and paint them in the best possible light. And you'll figure out how to motivate your team. You'll figure out those special things that everyone brings, because you're right, you need all of these different talents, and that will help you figure it out, and you'll be massively successful.
Yeah, Kathi, I mean, I'm just going back, great tips, but what you just said about dividing the work equally is just not how it works in the real world. But yet we do it. Trust me, my daughter calls me from school and is like, I just did this whole project all on my own. I'm like, well, good for you, but bad for you. I thought I taught you better, but she's still working on it, right? I mean, even as you go up in your career as a team leader, I am very fortunate to have an extremely talented group of individuals working on my team who know way more than I do. It's knowing what their strengths are, knowing who to go to in the organization for help, removing roadblocks, and helping them get through any barriers they have. That's really the job of a team leader. You're tackling all the time and helping the individuals to be successful. And if that happens, the whole group's successful. And I just have to reinforce something Diane Marsh said yesterday that really resonated with me in the moment. And it's a statement that, I've heard throughout my career but kind of lost sight of is, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you go with others. And as a leader, you're leading those others into that far. So just kind of think about that. And then also, in the coding world, slow is fast, fast is slow, right? So, yeah.
Real quick, and I think this really helps as you put your teams together. I had one of my joys of leadership in the past number of years is watching new leaders come up and become great leaders. And so I had a gentleman working for me, and it was one of the first times he'd been a people leader before. And he approached it technically. He read books and he watched TED Talks, but it worked for him. And one of the things, and you can find many TED Talks about this on how you pull strengths out of team members. And he was building a new team, and we're very global. And before they dug in and got things going, he pulled them together in a workshop and really had everyone focus on what I bring to the table and what's my value. And that team was phenomenal. But before they ever got going, and everybody felt good about it.
Now, I'll just add one more thing from the opposite side of the issue. As an instructor, I would often have teams tell me, leads on teams tell me that so-and-so isn't contributing. So I would talk to the person who was, the target, so-and-so, and that person would say, they're calling meetings when they know I work. They're calling meetings in 15 minutes. I didn't even get the message. So back to what was said earlier, there may be other factors involved. And if all you're seeing is that they're not contributing, then you're missing the why, and maybe give them a chance to explain.
Okay, the question is, who are your professional role models and why? I do have a professional role model. She's the CIO of Flagstar Bank. She was my boss, and she was in a much different role, and we're both in the financial services industry. And I really grew to admire her and see her as a role model because, like me, she was a mom. She was developing in her career, and she was really trying to get that seat at the senior executive leadership table. And she fought really hard to come up in the ranks, and she did so. But when she was trying to get that kind of top seat at where we currently work, she was just roadblock against roadblock against roadblock. And so she kind of just looked around and said, you know what? And it kind of goes back to what Elaine said earlier. If I'm not learning a new skill and I'm not able to get what I want, this probably isn't the right place for me. And so she took it upon herself, put her career in her own, I always say drive the bus of your own career. And she did that, and now she's the CIO at Flagstar Bank. And I've always gone to her for advice. She gives very good, sage advice. And I think you just need to find the one or two people kind of that you can resonate with, you feel comfortable and open, just having a dialogue and being that role model for you that you can kind of see why they're doing what they're doing and understand what they have to tell you. What do you guys have?
what I'll share is I think sometimes people feel, oh, I need to have like that one person that I admire, that I want to be. And I always say there's unlikely one person that has all of those qualities. So when you're looking for, okay, what can I learn from? Or if you're fortunate enough to kind of shop around and find a mentor or mentors, what are the things, kind of like back to my original thing about what are the things about jobs you want? No, not as much what is the job I want. What are the qualities of that person? If you are, people often come to me because I worked less than full time for many years while raising all my kids, and okay, they come and think I've got the secrets to the universe on life balance. I'll tell you what I can, but I've got that piece. But there's people that I look at because, wow, you've achieved something so phenomenally technically, and I prefer to advise people to look at those pieces and parts of people and what can you take from each.
Yeah, I was going to say something fairly similar, right? That, I think for me, I have a million leaders that I admire. And most of my time when I'm in the presence of leaders, I'm looking at them and going, what is it that they have? What is it they do that I'm not great at? And why would I not have been able to stand up and give this amazing speech that someone gave? Like, what is it about me that I can learn from them? And, even today in the midst of this panel, I'm doing the same thing and I'm listening to Paula go, wow, her ability to tie the conversation back, like that's a skill I need still. I don't need that. I haven't learned that. But I watch Paula and I learn from Paula. And so to me, I would almost say every leader I interact with at some point is somebody that I'm learning something from and taking bits and pieces more than, to your point, I have ever said, this is the leader.
Yeah, so one of the leaders, when I first went to Nielsen, Mitchell Habib, who had been a GE person as well, phenomenal leader, if you ever have a chance, he did a great presentation of who he was, and he had up there the different managers and people he'd worked for, and the one thing that he learned from that one. And I thought that was really great to do. And so I've done the same thing with mine. And I've actually been teaching my children this. And my daughter, when she was in 6th grade, had a horrendous soccer coach. She wanted to quit. It was that bad, right? And it was just not a great year for her. And we worked with her on it and the challenges. And she persevered through that year. And then she says, well, my 2 soccer coaches were great. I want to write them thank you notes. I said, well, you have to write them to all 3. And she's like, well, but I didn't learn anything. I said, nope, each of them taught you something. Figure out what it is he taught you, and you put that in the thank you thing. And she recognized that he taught her resilience, right? And so she put that note to him, and he felt awesome, right? He thinks he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. He still thinks that. That's fine, because he wouldn't listen to us the whole year. Why would change now? But she learned a valuable lesson that even in those who aren't good leaders or aren't the ones you're looking for, there are lessons and things you can learn to make yourself better. And so that's something that we're trying to teach those kids as well then.
So the statement is basically, learning about emotional intelligence later in your career. And do we, it seems to be perceived as a female, or do we think that it, is inclusive of males as well? Emotional intelligence, I think, doesn't have to do with male or female, but I think women, we feel it's more geared towards us. But it's not, really. I mean, in our leadership group, we all had to take it, male or female, equal playing field to learn about it. I think it's our perception, perhaps, of what we're taking in as, oh, this must be geared towards females. But we have to kind of reflect back on that and say, is it really? Do you guys perceive it as females? No. It's a good, there's a great book out there. I can't remember the author, but if you haven't read it, I highly suggest Emotional Intelligence.
Yeah, Simon Sinek does a lot of that, and he does a great job with it. And I really think it is not a male or female thing, because it's not about having emotions. And it's really about understanding and being able to read others, read the room, read the situation, and then respond appropriately to those situations, right? So my husband is much better at emotional intelligence than I am. I go to my emotions first versus thinking through. And emotional intelligence is really that pause and the ability to think through all of it prior to responding and how you respond in there, right? So I think it's a skill we all can learn, and I think we all have varying degrees, and I don't think it's a male or female as much as it's a personality and the way a person approaches things.
Yeah, so we are at the top of the hour, and I'm a big fan of start on time, end on time. Everyone has an agenda and a schedule. We could sit here probably all night end up back at the vault and keep going, right? So, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Marie, Kathi, Cindy, Elaine, and Carrie. It's been wonderful getting to know all of you and cyber stalking you and having the offline dialogue leading up to this. So thank you so much. You're incredibly gifted, talented women, and so thank you for sharing everything with the group. We're very grateful.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.